on X. It is a page called Protestia, and if I'm being honest, there's a lot of things that they share that I am not a huge fan of. I feel like they intentionally go at anybody that believes in the gifts to any extent, and they try to make them look as ridiculous as possible. They will occasionally point out things that I think need to be pointed out, and they also occasionally will post things that they actually like. And this is one that I saw that I thought would be a good place to start, and I think will kind of tie in with some other topics. So if you are listening or you're not able to read it, this post says more than 50 unmarried cohabiting couples got married in a joint ceremony at Lake Point Church last week, a 30,000 member multi site church led by Josh Howerton in Rockwell, Texas. 2 weeks prior, at the end of a sermon, he issued a challenge to unmarried couples in the congregation, encouraging them to act on the Lord's call. You're living with somebody that's not your spouse, you're sleeping with somebody that's not your spouse, or you've actually already started a family and had kids with somebody that's not your spouse. And you right now are coming under the loving conviction of the Holy Spirit that you need to honor God, bend your knee to Jesus, put a ring on it, and enter into a covenant with a person that you're already acting like you're in a covenant with. So this video is. And if you'll turn to. Could you guys hear that?
Yeah.
Okay. The video is about 2 minutes long. I'm probably not going to play the whole thing. We'll skip through.
One another, and you remember, you're going to say your name, and then Brian, you'll say your name. We're going to take these vows before God
but
and before these witnesses.
This is just.
Here we go.
In
if you'll repeat after me, I take you.
So you guys can see they've got all the couples up there. In our current culture, our current society, this is not something that's going to be extremely popular. This is not something that a lot of people like to hear. And especially, I think a pastor having the courage to call it out from the pulpit, saying like you are actively living in sin. The thing that you feel, and I think he was getting at this in a correct way. The thing that they're feeling that a lot of people would feel and think, oh, I don't like this. This is him offending me or saying something that is wrong or anything like that. He rightly knows that they're going to feel this. He rightly calls it conviction, and I think he ties it back to a good thing that is, if you are still feeling that conviction, then that means that God is trying to guide you. The Holy Spirit's guiding you somewhere that you need to go, and that's good that you're not just getting left to where you're at. I know we probably won't spend a ton of time on this, but I saw it. I thought it was a good thing. Either of you want to jump in, say anything regarding this, or maybe if you've seen anything like this or similar to this. I know there's not a lot of pastors that will take firm stances like this on the not popular issues from the pulpit. But yeah.
I think it's interesting, especially in our culture, because I think when you sent it, I was reminded of 1 Corinthians 7 when Paul's, in a way, kind of saying a similar thing. He's talking about, that kind of, well-known verse of like, if you're burning with passion, get married. And, during that time, that may have, I feel like during that time, marriage was considered as a worldview a lot more serious than what it is now. Now it's more of you still can leave. Divorce is always an option when obviously as a Christian, that necessarily shouldn't be our viewpoint. So I think it's interesting, kind of seeing that Pauline stance being taken here. Like you said, I don't think you really ever see that very often in culture.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's especially too with I think you can look at a couple different places with this. The idea of commitment, I think, is a big thing. Like people want to even if you look at like phone plans right now, right? Like a big thing right now is getting a phone plan that you're not like in a contract with, which I get, there's some benefits to things like that. but everything is like a month to month basis. So if you ever just start feeling like you don't want to do it anymore, you can opt out. And we see that, I think, with where people don't want to get into a marriage because they still maybe view it as more of a commitment. But even a lot, a lot of people that are getting into marriage, it's not really a commitment. They're still kind of viewing it as an easy opt out. You know, you can just get divorced. Even, looking at um, churches and being at churches, leaving a church is another instance that it should be difficult to do. Divorce should be difficult to do. If you're doing relationships with people right, even if you're making the right decision, it should be difficult to make that decision. We won't get into a ton of details. We recently left a church that we were at. There was no animosity towards anybody that was there. We loved the pastor. We loved the people. We just felt like we needed to be elsewhere. And I remember sitting down with the pastor, and I was I was broken because we love the pastor, we love his family, we love the people there, and it sucked to do, but I think it shows that we like we did church right while we were there because it was difficult to move on. It should be difficult to move on. Now, um, Charlie, I know you're not married, at least not yet. I know it's
No,
coming down
not
the
yet.
pipe. Um,
Whoa, I don't know about that. As far as I don't know that. As far as I know, all right. You know something I
um,
don't.
we'll speak it into existence, right?
Yeah,
Um,
right.
but so what are your thoughts being kind of on the before side of this? You're not married, and so seeing something like this, especially I know you have a lot of tie-ins with younger people.
Hmm.
You do a lot of stuff with testimony for younger people. What
Yeah.
are your thoughts seeing something like this, and how maybe that's going to be perceived by younger generation, seeing a stage full of people all getting married because they
Right.
felt that conviction.
Now, I feel like, and this was just like the first thing that popped in my head when I saw it was like, if you're thinking about for my generation, are they going to think it's like, are people feeling convicted? Or are they going to feel like it's performative? Like, because I think that's a lot of things. And this was just one thing I was wondering is like, because it may be all those people up there are feeling convicted. I'm not in the room, right?
Yeah,
You know, but sometimes you look at these things and you're like, is that really, God moving, or is that just a performative thing? And you have to, use discernment on that. And I'm not saying either way, because I mean, again, I'm not in the room.
yeah,
Um, I know that my generation's very like, I think we're skeptics, like, because we've been, I guess, in a lot of ways, we've been lied to about a lot of things, like, in the news and stuff. So we're very, like, I don't know what's true. I don't, we're like very, and in a lot of ways, that's a good thing,
yeah,
because we're trying to seek the truth out. But that's the first thing I saw. But not that, I mean, if they're all convicted in that room, that was a great way to do it. Um,
yeah,
and it's funny because I just, there's a couple that I was actually in their wedding for, and they're my age, right? And so there are people my age getting married, and
yeah,
I was in their wedding, and they like, they don't mean to do, but they convict me just about me while I'm watching them. They convict me like just by me watching their relationship, like, because I'm like,
yeah,
man, like, I need to get better at this, and this, and this, A, B, and C before I even think about marriage, right? And build these habits now. Like I feel like God's given me a lot of knowledge through them, but I'm still not like there yet. And and I think that's what a lot of my generation needs to realize too is like they're like, oh yeah, I'm ready for marriage. It's like, no, you're not. It's like, I'm sorry, but you're not. Like there's things that you've got to work on, and I'm got to work on too. Like and I mean, that couple is just a very rare instance. They are, because their episode just came out today, so that's why it's in my head.
I gotcha.
They're very goal oriented, and that's one thing I've seen about a lot of Christian couples, especially now. They're very, which is great. They knew what they wanted from the get go, even from when they were dating. They've discussed it, they've talked it through, um, and like you have to be prepared for that. Like especially as the man of the house, you're leading, right? And so you have to figure out how you're going to provide, how you're going to do this, how you're going to do that. And it's it might be a scary thought, but like, and that might be where the commitment comes in, right? They're like, I don't know if
Yeah,
I can do that. I don't know if I can lead. But you have to, I mean, you have to do it someday. All right. If you want a family, you want kids, you're going to have to do it someday. And But definitely, I mean, start with those habits, especially if you're not married. Like you've got to build those habits now for yourself, but also for your future wife. She'll see that. Um, and I mean, I don't even know who that's going to be, and I'm trying my hardest to build those habits now, right? Jesse over here trying to put me with somebody. I don't know who it's going to be yet, but yeah, you have to, build those habits now while you're
And
single.
that's something too. I think when you find, I'm not saying like you specifically, Charlie, but
Mhm.
anybody, and Nate, I'm sure will attest to this as well. Um, you may know that you have things you need to work on prior to getting married, but then after you get married, you realize there's a whole bunch of other
Mm.
stuff that you still have to work on that you didn't even know that you had to work on.
Right.
You and then once you have kids, that amplifies even more. I even just a little bit ago, I was laying down our two youngest, and we've got a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and they were both very, very tired. No naps were taken today. They had just been like wide open for the last like 2 hours after I got off of work and trying to get them laid down. And it was very uh, a frustrating experience trying to get them to stay in their bed. And I got a little snappy as I was walking out because the 4-year-old kept asking stuff and kept asking stuff. And so I walked out, and I had a cup for them because they asked for a drink of water, and I set it down, and I stood there for a minute, and I'm like, I really had no reason to be. And so I went back in, and I apologized to her. I told her I shouldn't have, and then that opened up a whole bunch more questions and stuff. But just as you build deeper relationships with people and you get into more relationship with people, I think that is, it reveals parts of your character where you're not living out completely the way that you should be. And we're never going to be perfect. But I think it does take some maturity to see those areas where you need to work and actually be able and willing to do work in those areas. Um, you guys have anything else you want to throw on that one? Or
I think I do have a thought of just the one thing I just watching that video I'm unsure about is kind of going along with Charlie with what you were saying, watching it, not knowing the full context, and I just think of being, what was said in front of a room full of people of, essentially if you're in here, you're living with somebody outside of marriage, you need to like, be convicted and get married. I just think, I don't know if that's the answer for every single one of those people. And what I mean by that is, there might be somebody in that room, that's it in an abusive relationship. And, they're being told that and they're like sitting confused. Well, he's saying that the Lord is saying this and I should be feeling this way and I'm supposed to get married. But,
yeah,
it's not a healthy relationship. So I think one thing I would just, wonder and, feel caution about is, that taking that step may not be the right answer for everybody. I mean, which that very well, could have been said or could have been done. I don't necessarily know that for sure, but that's just one thing, one thought of caution, I had of
yeah.
that.
No, that's a good point too. And I know it said, I think um, he had, uh, he had a couple weeks of sermons leading up to this. So I don't know what was said prior to that, but I do think that is an important thing to throw out because if, I know this isn't a perfect parallel, but and Nate, you and I talked about this a little bit this week, just texting back and forth. Some of the Mike Winger stuff that's coming out recently. He has been, anyone that does not know, he's been doing a lot of expose type content, and all of his content is, if he's putting this out, it's not monetized. He is trying to help people that are victims of abuse, different types of abuse. I mean, all of it really falls under clergy abuse of some kind. But there was one he brought up. There's a gentleman, I'll use that term loosely. His name is Sean Bowles. He is a fake prophet, and he prophesied over this lady and told her that she needed to get married to the guy that she was with. And so she did. And this ended up leading to he was abusive to her, and I think she was aware of that beforehand, but she stayed in the marriage because she was told this is what God wants you to do. And almost to the point that the final straw, he like choked her
That's
choked her out. Like she like for a few days after the fact, she was still having trouble breathing because, and Mike Wingner added this commentary onto it that he's done a lot of he's done a lot of like a domestic abuse counseling and things like that. And so he has said, it's not uncommon for something like that to happen and somebody to die like a day or so later because the damage is done and whatever. So I do think that's a valid point. It's obviously not apples to apples comparison, but I think it is a valid point to bring up that just because you're sinning currently doesn't mean that you just need to like jump into a marriage. Like you may need to jump back and not be in a relationship at all with that person. But that takes discernment and some pastoral leadership to really be able to say what exactly you're needing in the situation.